Welcome in to Daily Faceoff Live, your go-to source for everything hockey. Live every weekday at noon Eastern.
Happy Monday, hockey fans. Welcome in to Daily Faceoff Live, brought to you by Betano. The game starts now at betano.ca. And boy, if you've just been rolling over Florida Panther moneyline bets, you are living good on a Monday. I'm Tyler Yaremchuk. He is our NHL insider, Frank Saravalli. Frank, how was your weekend?
It was good. My daughter's birthday party yesterday. I had 18 grade 1 mermaids running around my house getting makeup and hairs braided. So it was an adventurous weekend, I'll say that.
So for a guy who's about to be sequestered in a quiet room with no technology, I can imagine this is coming at a pretty good time. We're going to talk about that. Let's start 2 minutes and 30 seconds up on the clock. Yes, I know there's a lot of people who are probably like, start with the Leafs. We're going to get to that with David Alter in just a little bit. Let's talk draft lottery, though, Frank. Tell us what you're going to be doing tonight, because this is a pretty neat kind of experience.
Yeah, today's the day. The Connor Bedard sweepstakes. We find out where he is heading in June at the NHL draft. The draft lottery set for 8 p.m., and it's going to be taking place at the NHL Network's Secaucus, New Jersey studios, and that is where I will be. I will see the ping pong balls being pulled, and I'm really excited for the experience. I haven't been there before to do it. I'll be in there with a couple other reporters sequestered in the room. No technology. Need to hand over my phone beforehand, and looking forward to telling that story after the fact, because I love these sort of the comments that I get on social media, even just posting about Connor Bedard this morning and the draft lottery odds, saying it's rigged. He always goes to a big market or a big NHL franchise. I don't think so. Not even by a long shot. I'm looking forward to seeing it with my own eyes tonight.
Yes, let's take a look at the way the odds board sits heading into the lottery tonight. Anaheim, obviously the number one chance because they finished 32nd at 25.5. Then Columbus, Chicago, San Jose, Montreal, and Arizona sitting at a 7.5% chance. Frank, which one of these is maybe the best story in your opinion?
Ooh, the best story? Well, it's probably not on the board. I would say the Vancouver Canucks, a Vancouver kid going to the Canucks would be a phenomenal story. When you take a look at that, obviously it's one of those things you shake your head at. But in terms of competitive story, I would say the Columbus Blue Jackets. I think they're the team, when you look at this group, that's most ready to be a playoff team in the shortest amount of time. Craig Button, we had on our Daily Faceoff Rundown podcast last week, the noted draft expert from TSN, 30 years of NHL experience. He said if Connor Bedard goes to the Columbus Blue Jackets, he could have 100 points next year in the NHL, which is a crazy, mind-blowing number to think about. Obviously, we've seen it before with some other generational talents, but it speaks to how good he is, and it speaks to some of the pieces around him that could potentially be in Columbus. So that would make sense from a competitive standpoint.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. They have another first-round pick in this draft, owning the LA Kings first-rounder as a part of the Korpisalo and Gavrikov deal. And Frank, something to remember, they didn't have Zach Werenski this year either, so it could be a quick turnaround in Columbus. Let's wrap up this segment by flashing up Tankathon, and we are going to do the official Daily Faceoff Live prediction of what will happen tonight. Alex, do we have the ability? Hit it, run it. There you go. The Anaheim Ducks hold on to one. That's a pretty tame one, considering what the three of us did, me, you, and Jason Greger on the DFO rundown. But Anaheim would obviously be happy there. Chicago moves up one slot as well. Frank, your thoughts on our official prediction?
It hardly ever works out this way, where the team that has the best odds wins the player. But also, we haven't really had odds quite tilted like this in a long time. With some of the rules that are in place, a 25.5% chance, that's 12% more than the Columbus Blue Jackets. Or if you look at it in another perspective, the gap between Anaheim in this case and the Columbus Blue Jackets is more than the entire odds for the Chicago Blackhawks in general. So certainly wouldn't be surprised at all to see Anaheim take home Connor Bedard at the end of the day. It's the fact that they limited this field to 11. You can only jump up as high as 10 spots. That's a different wrinkle. And at some point we're bound to have that 32nd place team land the player.
if you want more draft lottery coverage, Frank will have a story up early tomorrow from his sequestered spot. Stephen Ellis tonight on dailyfaceoff.com. I believe he's going to drop his first mock draft of the year. He'll be on the show tomorrow. And our friends over at Canucks Army and Canucks Conversation, Chris Faber and David Quadrelli, are going to be going live on the Canucks Army YouTube for the draft lottery tonight as well. And I know those two, they'll be having a good time with it. So draft lottery goes this evening at 8 o'clock Eastern time. And it's right before playoff hockey again. We'll talk about the one game on tap a little bit later, Frank, but let's look back at last night. The Seattle Kraken just simply cannot be stopped. They take a 2-1 series lead, and they score a touchdown on the Dallas Stars. They convert the touchdown, popping home 7. They have now had 10 players who have multiple goals throughout the course of this playoff run. They have 16 different goal scorers through basically a round and a half. And they chased Jake Ottinger from the crease. Before this series, Ottinger was my X factor. He was the reason I thought the Stars would come out on top. And you look at his numbers so far, they're not just average, they're ugly, Frank. The Seattle Kraken, even without their leading scorer, I could keep going on with the reasons why what they're doing is so wildly impressive. Your thoughts on the Kraken moving to a 2-1 series lead?
I mean, look at this box score. It's peak Seattle Kraken. No one has a multi-goal game. They end up with 7 different goal scorers. They now have 16 different goal scorers in these playoffs, which are by a wide margin the league leader. They only have 18 skaters. They're missing like 2 guys. Maybe they've had a couple guys that have shuffled in for injuries and whatnot. Basically, only a couple guys in their entire roster haven't felt what it feels like to score a playoff goal this spring. That's an incredible feat given that, I don't know, we're only 10 games in. It's insane to think about for the Seattle Kraken. They just come at you in waves. They're relentless. They're hungry. We've talked about all this before, but I'm really surprised that this team, without a superstar, yes, they're deep, and yes, there's some of their parts is more than any individual one piece. But to get to Jake Ottinger now twice in this series in the first 3 games, to make him look utterly average has been very surprising considering how good he was against the Minnesota Wild in round 1. This looked like a guy that was only going to be getting better and better as the playoffs rolled along. And instead you see it here, Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening in Seattle, 706 save percentage in that game before getting yanked. And Scott Wedgwood, the wedge wall, comes in. They're going to need more from Jake Ottinger. They're going to need more from their offense because also look at Dallas's 2 goal scorers in that game. Where are the Stars at? And by the way, Miro Heiskanen seems like some good news that he'll be back for game 4. The Dallas Stars coach Pete DeBoer was saying that Heiskanen wanted to come back, some score effects in there as a reason to not put him back in. But man, for a guy that leads the postseason in ice time, what a fluky play that was, by the way, too, getting hit with that shot in front. To be without Miro Heiskanen could have swung this series entirely in the Seattle Kraken favor, which it rests right now anyway.
Yeah, Earth to Jason Robertson, the Stars' undoubted MVP in the regular season, has just 2 goals so far in the playoffs. Game 4 will be the swing game in that series. Seattle with a chance tomorrow night to put the pedal to the floor and go up 3-1. It would be something. The New Jersey Devils, they crawled right back into their series against the Carolina Hurricanes. So let's go there. It was the Hughes brothers doing a lot of the work. Granted, there were a lot of active pieces in that Devils lineup, but Jack scores twice, adds a couple of assists. And how about his brother Luke in his playoff debut, picking up a couple of apples? I know Devils fans were chomping at the bit to see that guy in the playoff lineup, and the payoff was immediate for Lindy Ruff and company. It almost makes you think, why weren't you playing him a little bit earlier on in the playoffs? But anyways, Frank, Timo Meier scores. He's maybe starting to find his game. Have the Devils woken up, or is this just one game where maybe the Canes were a little off?
No, I think the Devils have woken up, and I think that's a scary thought for the Carolina Hurricanes because you think back to last round, Devils Rangers, and how ugly that looked in the first 2 games for New Jersey before they found themselves and their footing. And I think maybe that's the most impressive part about this Devils playoff run to this point is their ability to flush the past. Yes, they're a young team. Yes, they're not scarred by some of the playoff demons that some other teams have sleeping under their beds, the Toronto Maple Leafs. But I will say that in this case, the Devils' ability to bounce back from that, park it, and say, you know what? all that matters is what is right in front of us. Well, here's what they're staring at right now is an ability to pull even in this second round series against the Carolina Hurricanes team that has been good. They're mostly a disciplined and consistent team. You know what you're going to be getting from them night in and night out, but the top end scoring talent of the New Jersey Devils has the ability to burst through and rise above that. We know what the Hurricanes are missing in terms of the scoring department. They've been able to do it mostly by depth, stealing a page from the Seattle Kraken playbook. You saw the Jordan Martinook penalty shot goal. Like, they've gotten it from all sorts of different people in this series to this point. Can the Devils find another gear now and do it one more time? I know this is going to boil it down to maybe the most simplest way I can say it, which is winner of game 4 for me wins the series. If the Devils can find a way to draw even, they're going to be the team that's advancing to the Eastern Conference Final. And obviously, if the Carolina Hurricanes put them down in a 3-1 spot, I think they're going to be in prime position.
Any shot you think the Canes change their goalie for game 4 and go with Pyotr Kochetkov, or is that an overreaction?
I personally don't think it's an overreaction. I think Kochetkov has looked really steady. And look, he's one of those guys, you heard Sheldon Keefe say it this morning about Joe Wall. The moment isn't too big for him. And I think on a pure skill for skill basis, he's just as good as Anderson or Ranta or whoever the Canes want to throw in that net. I don't really think it's going to make a difference, but I would go with Kochetkov.
Yeah, I was just looking, like, some of the runs he went on this year were wildly impressive. If you're looking to catch lightning in a bottle, maybe Kochetkov is the guy who can do it. Maybe that's something you look at more if the series goes to 2-2. Game 4 of that one, also tomorrow night as part of a Stanley Cup playoff doubleheader. Let's talk about the one game going on this evening, Frank, as the series shifts to Edmonton between the Oilers and Golden Knights, and things are all tied up at 1. That means Edmonton does hold home ice advantage. Before we look ahead to this evening, let's look back a little bit. There was a moment in this series through 4 periods where Leon Draisaitl had 6 goals. He already has the 41st most productive playoffs ever. And we're only like 8 games into this thing, 6 away from Reggie Leach at the top there. Frank, I'm not even sitting here talking about if Draisaitl's going to get it at some point. I think there's a conversation of, can Draisaitl tie Reggie Leach by the end of this round? The run he's on is remarkable.
It's a totally fair question to ask. You did ask it on the rundown this morning. I'm going to say that he gets to 18 this round. And quite obviously, if the Oilers are advancing to the conference final, this record has his name written all over it. You can basically see the person, I'm thinking of like the British Open where the guy, the chiseler, is standing there like ready to hammer in the name. Like, that's the NHL record book and what's in front of Leon Draisaitl now. It's incredible, this playoff run that he's been on. And I love how everyone kind of, you know, I don't want to say rips, but like people are like, oh yeah, but he does it on the power play. Like, as if the goals count somehow less because they're scored on the power play in the playoffs. Like, get out of here with that garbage. I've talked all year long about how special his power play season has been, and this power play in general, but we're 2 games in and he's got 3 even strength goals this series as well. So like, you can back off on that front as well. And maybe the scariest part, Tyler, if you're the Vegas Golden Knights, is the fact that Connor McDavid has continued to pile up multi-point games that have essentially gone, I don't know, unnoticed. Like, people aren't even really talking about it. And he's got a ton of points in his pocket. So he's sort of yet to be the, he's been obviously much better, in game 2, the entire Oilers team was, but this team is in a scary spot if the Golden Knights want to try and run and gun. And I don't know how other way to approach playing against the Oilers.
Yeah, and I said that at the beginning of the series. LA tried to slow it down, right, and drown out the Oilers. Didn't work. Vegas plays that aggressive up-tempo style, and I said if they want to play run and gun, they're going up against the best run and gun team in the NHL. And I'll put it this way. The scariest thing for a team playing the Edmonton Oilers is if Connor McDavid's the best player in the series. The second scariest thing might be if Connor McDavid's the second best player in the series, because that means Leon Draisaitl is absolutely taking over, and that's been the case. Do you think Vegas losing last change as well, shifting to Edmonton. Do you think they can shut down the big guns, Frank, or do you think Edmonton keeps rolling?
I don't think they can. I don't think they have the pieces to do it. I don't think they're built that way. I think their best hope is that Edmonton shoots itself in the foot and gives up a series of turnovers, and not just one or two, but costly and at the right time. That's, I think, the hope is that you can capitalize on it if you're Vegas, because otherwise, I just don't see anyone shutting these two players down. I really don't. That was the reason why I picked the Oilers to win the cup in my playoff bracket, is I just don't see McDavid and Draisaitl being denied. We'll see. And you see a team like Dallas lose again, and I was just thinking, like, just feels like the path is becoming a little bit more open every time each day passes for the Oilers.
Yeah. Another big key for Vegas will be staying out of the box. They let the Oilers have 6 power play attempts in Game 2. Edmonton scored on 3 of them, and yet that dropped their percentage during the playoffs, which is another just wild stat with this Oilers team and their production. One Canadian fan base, Frank, they are feeling good as the series shifts to Edmonton. The other Canadian fan base still in the playoffs, oh boy, I guess we should probably get into that with our guest, David Alter. The All 32 is brought to you by Boston Pizza and their new Fanalytics-inspired menu with deep-fried pickles, a delicious new beer mosa, and the Italian deli pizza. There's no better place to watch the playoffs than at Boston Pizza. David Alter from SI.com and the Hockey News, also the host of Rink Wide Toronto, joins us on the show. David, let's just go through the last kind of 3 games as a whole. This Leafs team walked past the Bolts in 6. And yet they sit here down 3-0 to the Panthers. What's been the difference from round 1 to round 2?
Yeah, I mean, there's a glaring, obvious difference between round 1 and round 2, and it's the core 4 players. The Stars are not scoring goals. I mean, they're getting goals from their third and fourth line guys and support staff and some defensemen as well. I mean, Eric Gustafsson, who was just kind of a throw-in depth guy for a little bit of offense, was one of 2 goal scorers last night. But Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, William Nylander, John Tavares have pretty much been absent in this series. And so that's been a lot of angst from Leaf fans. And I didn't think we would come into a situation where after winning a round that all the goodwill that was built up from that would completely disappear. And that's exactly where we find ourselves now with the Leafs, the fan base, the team, and going into Game 4 now down 3-0.
David, I was going to ask you what the blueprint or roadmap is for the Leafs to get back into this series, and it kind of seems like even an overwhelming question to ask given the deficit that they're facing. So I'm really more curious about the mindset of this team. I was saying last week as we did our round 2 preview that it's only 7 days ago now. It seems longer than that given the hole that the Leafs are in. But that the big thing they had to guard against was this idea that because they won a round, that this year was a success, that all of a sudden you could take your foot off the gas. And this team, obviously this core itself, has stubbed its toe in a big way the last number of years when it seems like there's a wide open path. I mean, like, out of the clear blue sky, the 8 seed beats the best regular season team in NHL history in the first round. And you have this glorious opportunity, yet they don't have that sort of killer instinct. They don't, that, to use a Brendan Shanahan term, they don't have the fire, the intensity. And you saw that in Game 3. Where does that come from?
It's a really good question, Frank. I don't know. It's every year it just seems like you think that the Leafs are not capable of actually disappointing after these milestones, that there's room for incremental improvement. And then you come across a situation where you lose 3 games, you're not putting in your best effort. Even the last round was just, they advanced, but I mean, they won 3 overtime games on the road to do it. They continued to claim that their best hockey has not been played yet. And when it hasn't showed up and you don't have that instinct, I think you kind of have to look at yourselves in the mirror. The core guys have constantly had to kind of answer this question. And every year it looks like they're kind of on the precipice of doing that. And then for whatever reason, they don't get the job done. And then I look at previous years in exit interviews with media and everything like that. It just doesn't seem like the group is pissed off enough about what's taking place. Like they push the right message of, staying positive because the series isn't over, and that's true. But I think what the fan base and I think what some people want to see from the outside, even if they do show it on the inside, is that they give a you know what about what's going on. And when you listen to them talk after the game, it just kind of sounds like they don't really. So I don't know. I mean, if this ends the way we think it might end, then I think the rope for excuses is over, and you finally have to change something major. I don't know if it's necessarily the GM head coach. I think you might have to look at personnel and do what Florida did. They had that difficult question, and they changed the makeup of their team after finishing with the best record in the regular season. And right now, that's proving to be a brilliant move.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting point. They can look at the team beating them now as maybe the blueprint for what could come if they are eliminated. Just quickly, as they look to keep the series alive, is there any update on if Ilya Samsonov will be a part of that?
Yeah, so Sheldon Keefe just wrapped up his media availability literally minutes before coming on here, and he did say that Samsonov is feeling better and that he's scheduled for some tests and an MRI to determine the severity of it. But other than that, he didn't put a real timeline on it. But if Samsonov's tests come back okay and he wants to play, I know Samsonov's a guy who likes to play hurt in that situation. If the chips are down and he wants to have the option, I'm sure he would take it. But they have reiterated their confidence in Joe Wall, and based on the sounds of it, it doesn't sound like Murray is going to be the option in any of those cases, just given how long he's had a layoff here. But Samsonov, it doesn't sound like he's going to be ready for Game 4, but I guess it's just going to depend on what the tests and the MRI reveal.
Couple days off for the Leafs before Game 4, and their season will be on the line, and you're down there in Florida covering it like a blanket. David, appreciate your time today.
Hey, thanks, guys.
There you go. Big shout out to David Alter for hopping on the show with us. If you want to read more of his work or find more of his work, you can find him at DAlter on Twitter. Frank, our Ask DFO question today as we dig in to the inbox. Off the ice, there was some news over the weekend. The Rangers and head coach Gerard Gallant agreed to mutually part ways after the Rangers losing in round 1. People want to know, what's the latest on the Rangers?
Yeah, so they're beginning their search, as Chris Drury mentioned in a statement. And it just felt like there was a lot of stubbornness on the part of Gerard Gallant. I think that's severely limited his time frame in place at the number of his past positions, whether it was in Vegas or seemingly Florida before that. That he's obviously a successful coach, one that has gotten a lot out of his players, but seems somewhat resistant to change. So 200+ point seasons for the New York Rangers. There's a lot of teams that would love to have that type of year, but 2 series wins to show for it over those 2 years. Also something a lot of teams would like to have, but in this case, they move on. And I'm really curious to see what they do next, because I think they do have a really talented, smart coach that's been working for them in Hartford the last number of years. Chris Knobloch, who has NHL experience as an assistant, has been through and seen just about everything you can in pro hockey except for being an NHL head coach. He seems to be ready. Will they give him an opportunity, or will they go with a more experienced coach? I've been arguing for weeks now, no matter what the opening is, in order to get the next John Cooper, to get the next Jared Bednar, you got to give someone a shot. They all started somewhere. So seems like Chris Knobloch is ready. We'll see if he's the guy.
Yeah, you look at the 8 teams remaining in the Stanley Cup playoffs. 3 of them have first-time NHL head coaches behind their bench, with Jay Woodcroft in Edmonton, Sheldon Keefe in Toronto, and Rod Brindamore in Carolina. The other 5 are retread, rehires. So it'll be interesting to see the direction that the New York Rangers go. Let's get to tonight's slate one more time with my Betano Daily Bets, brought to you by Betano.ca. The game starts now with Betano and Frank. I do not think that the Vegas Golden Knights are going to slow down the Edmonton Oilers tonight. And you know what? Even if they do slow them down a little bit and win the game, I still think Edmonton's offense can keep going. Even in the games they lose, they score a lot. Edmonton scored 4 in the first period. They're lined for total goals at 3.5 is paying -133 on Betano. I think Edmonton can score 4 again here tonight. Not a ton of value on them winning this game or anything like that, but I do think betting on them to score a lot is a safer play. So over 3.5 at -133. And Leon Draisaitl, I mean, the guy has 6 goals in 2 games. You're going to give me -18, somewhat close to even money on him finding the back of the net once in this hockey game. I'm going to take that every single day of the week. I love Draisaitl -118 to score and the Oilers to get to at least 4 goals as a team. And you know what, Frank? Even if people are there and feeling a little bit riskier, Draisaitl's +250 to score twice tonight. Would that intrigue you at all, Mr. Saravalli?
Yeah, I would take that. I like those odds.
Seems juicy.
Give me a multi-goal game.
Juicy. Yeah. Maybe even Connor McDavid to do it again. It's still wild considering the production from Draisaitl that McDavid's odds are not as juicy. The book's still giving a ton of respect to number 97, who had a big game 2 against Vegas. Let's wrap up the show with a little garbage time, Frank. On draft lottery eve, you want to talk about not Connor Bedard, but the number 2 pick.
Yeah, all eyes will be on the draft lottery to see how this all shakes out. The ping pong balls will be pulled around 6:30. The show begins at 8 p.m. And as mentioned, I'll be sequestered in the NHL Network studios watching all that happens behind the scenes. But somewhere around 2 o'clock in the morning in Budapest, Hungary, is where Adam Fantilli will be as he's preparing for the World Hockey Championships with Team Canada. And you would think for the consensus number 2 overall pick, the guy who would be number 1 overall most years, he'd be sitting up nervously in his hotel room saying, hey, I got to find out where I'm going to spend the next number of years of my life. Instead, he told Ian Mendes from The Athletic, who is in Budapest, Hungary, I ain't setting an alarm. There's been some tough practices here, and I will just wake up in the morning and find out what happens. Love to see that sort of confidence and headspace from Adam Fantilli, a no doubt special player. So whoever is landing the number 2 pick in the 2023 NHL draft will have quite a player to add to their organization. I know he's not the number 1 prize. He's not the Connor McDavid, but if you end up with Jack Eichel or whatever the next comparison might be, still a pretty damn good player. So don't be sleeping on number 2 if your team falls short while Adam Fantilli's sleeping himself.
And if you're the GM or representative for Anaheim, Columbus, Chicago, San Jose, Montreal, I maybe want you to just go Google Tim Murray draft lottery, and that's your outline for what not to say if you get the 2nd overall pick. Obviously, those infamous comments about being disappointed to be getting Jack Eichel. It was certainly something. Frank, you enjoy draft lottery, and I know that if you aren't answering my calls tonight, you're not just ignoring me. We'll chat again tomorrow on the show.
Thanks for tuning in to Daily Faceoff Live. Make sure you hit the subscribe button to never miss an episode.